There is a story of a boy who stood at the edge of his childhood home, fists clenched, voice trembling, asking his father, "Do you even see me?" The father, bewildered, replied, "Of course I see you. I provide for you, don't I?" And in that moment, the boy learned a painful truth. Being seen is not the same as being understood. Have you ever wondered what happens to a son when his soul screams in a language his parents refuse to speak? What fractures inside him when his tears are met with logic, his fears with practicality, his dreams with warnings? Is he doomed to wander the chasm between their expectations and his essence, or does that very tension forge something unbreakable within him? We live in a world where love is measured in sacrifices made, not in silences heard, where a father's pride is often a wall, not a bridge, where a mother's worry becomes a cage, not a compass. We are told that to be loved is to be shaped, trimmed of our edges until we fit neatly into the family portrait. But what if the opposite were true? What if the more a son feels misunderstood, the more he discovers a voice he never knew he had? A voice that does not echo his parents' words, but sings its own defiant, aching song. This is not a speech about rebellion. This is a speech about what grows in the gaps of understanding, about the truths that take root when a boy realizes he must parent himself. The ancient Greeks knew this dissonance well. They told of Icarus, whose father crafted wings of wax and feathers, then warned him not to fly too close to the sun. But they never asked why the boy looked upward at all. Was it disobedience or destiny? The philosopher Kierkegaard once wrote, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." And what is a son's despair, if not this, to be loved for what he could be, rather than forgiven for what he is? Imagine a boy who spends years bending himself to fit his parents' vision. He learns to smile when he wants to scream, to nod when he wants to argue, to shrink when he wants to expand. Then one day, he wakes up and realizes he has become a stranger in his own skin. What happens next? Does he collapse under the weight of their disappointment, or does he finally stand upright, even if it means casting a shadow they refuse to recognize? Think of Nietzsche's words, "You must become who you are." But how can a son become himself when his parents see him only as a reflection of their own unmet dreams? There is a moment in every boy's life when he understands that his father's love is not a lighthouse, but a locked door. That his mother's embrace is both a shelter and a straitjacket. And in that moment, he faces a choice: to spend his life knocking or to turn away and build his own house. Ask yourself, what would you sacrifice to be understood? Your passions? Your peace? Or worse, your truth? There is a story of a sculptor who, when asked how he carved an elephant from stone, replied, "I simply chipped away everything that wasn't the elephant." The misunderstood son is both the sculptor and the stone. Every silent dinner, every dismissed emotion, every "you'll understand when you're older" is another chip, until all that remains is the unyielding core of who he was always meant to be. But here is the tragedy. His parents often mistake this revelation for rejection. They see his selfhood as a betrayal, not a birth. And so the chasm widens, not because love is absent, but because understanding is. Yet, in that chasm, something extraordinary happens. The son learns to hold his own hand in the dark. He discovers that his worth is not a verdict handed down by his parents, but a fire he tends himself. The Stoics called this "the obstacle is the way." The very pain of being misunderstood becomes the path to self-mastery. And so the boy who was never heard becomes the man who listens to his own soul with unbearable clarity. He realizes that his parents' inability to see him was never about his inadequacy, but about the limits of their own vision. But here is the question that haunts him. Can he forgive them? Can he look at his father and see not a tyrant, but a man who was once just as unseen? Can he hold his mother's worry and recognize it as the only language she was taught to speak? The longer a son walks this path, the more he understands that understanding is a gift, not an entitlement, that some bridges can't be built from both sides. And yet, perhaps this is the most painful revelation of all. He still loves them. Not because they comprehend him, but because he has learned to comprehend himself. And now, a question for you. Have you ever stood in a room full of family and felt utterly alone? Not because they didn't care, but because they cared in the wrong ways? The misunderstood son knows this loneliness like a second skin, but in its depths, he finds an unexpected freedom. The freedom to define himself on his own terms, to love his parents without needing them to approve of who he's become. This is the paradox at the heart of his journey. The very thing that once made him feel invisible, their inability to see him, becomes the catalyst for his becoming. He is like a tree growing in the shade of taller oaks, forced to stretch higher, dig deeper, just to taste the light. And in that straining, he discovers a strength he might never have known had the sun been handed to him freely. So if you've ever felt like the stranger in your own home, stay with me. There is more to uncover, more shadows to name, more light to let in. Like and subscribe so we can continue this conversation, so we can walk this path together a little further. Because the truth is, this is only the beginning. The story of the misunderstood son is not one of lack, but of latent power, not of silence, but of the voice that emerges when no one is listening. And if you listen closely now, you might hear it. The whisper of every boy who ever stood at the edge of himself and asked, "What if I am not what they say I am?" The answer, when it comes, will not be found in their words, but in the vast uncharted territory of his own becoming. There is a moment in every son's life when he realizes his father's hands, the same hands that lifted him onto his shoulders, that tightened his bicycle wheels, that gripped his own with rough assurance, are not the hands of a god, but of a man who once stood where he now stands, equally afraid, equally uncertain, and in that moment something shifts. The pedestal crumbles not out of anger, but out of a quiet, devastating clarity. His father does not hold the answers because no one ever did. We are taught that to be a man is to be solid, unshaken, a pillar against the storm. But what of the boy who feels more like the storm itself? The one whose emotions rise like thunder, whose doubts pour down like rain, whose very being refuses to be contained by the neat, dry logic of how things should be. His parents call it rebellion. The poets call it aliveness. Who is right? Consider the myth of Proteus, the shape-shifting sea god who could only be grasped when held through all his transformations. Is this not what every son secretly longs for? To be held not in spite of his changes, but through them. To have his parents say, "I do not recognize you today, but I am here. Show me who you are now." Yet so often, What he hears instead is the echo of their fear. Come back to where I can recognize you, where I know how to love you. And so the son learns to split himself. There is the boy they see, the one who nods, who performs, who wears their expectations like a too-tight suit. And then there is the shadow boy, the one who paces the halls of his own mind, whispering, "This is not all of me." The tragedy is not that his parents don't hear the whisper. It's that they've spent so long silencing their own, they no longer recognize the sound. But here is where the story turns. The misunderstood son does not wither in this divide. He adapts. Like a plant growing toward a distant window, he twists himself into new shapes, not out of weakness, but out of an instinct even he doesn't yet understand, the need to survive. And in that survival, he stumbles upon an unexpected truth. His parents' inability to fully see him has given him a gift, the ability to see himself. Ask yourself, what do we call a boy who learns to nourish his own roots? Who waters himself with his own tears? Who turns his face toward his own son? We call him a man, not because he has stopped needing love, but because he has started choosing which kinds of love will not make him disappear. There is a Japanese concept, kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold so the fractures become part of its beauty. The misunderstood son is a living kintsugi. Every "you're too sensitive," every "why can't you be more like your brother," every time he was handed a script instead of a question, these are his cracks. But the gold? That is his own. The late-night realizations that his dreams are valid. The friendships where he is heard without explanation. The moments he catches his reflection and thinks, "Oh, there you are."